Now, that's not the only sign that Australia is a country without confidence or courage or self-belief. More serious is a sickness we now see sweeping the West, especially the English-speaking parts, a self-hatred. Again, I'm going to make some comparisons with countries overseas, and you'll say, oh, those countries, they're going nuts, and then I'm going to show you. But so are we, and in exactly the same way. First, a small example of what I'm talking about, a survey by a journalism student of fellow students in Washington, D.C.
Are you proud to be an American?
No. I feel embarrassed to be an American every day. I think a lot of things about this country are really embarrassing. Just like, I mean, racist history, colonization.
I'm a black person, so obviously I experience a lot of, there's like oppression that comes with that.
No. Be proud of what? What is there to be proud about if you're black?
Most of the time, no. I don't even really think there is an American dream really anymore. I mean, like, I would honestly rather kind of live somewhere else.
There was more. No pride in their country. Not that they could actually think of a better country, of course.
Can you name a better country than the United States in your opinion? I'm not sure if I can.
I don't think I can.
I mean, there's probably a really tiny European country that's thriving.
Okay, this kind of self-hatred of the West is the fashionable view of the elites now. You see it preached in schools and you see it preached by athletes. For instance, like US hammer thrower Gwen Berry last week, who turned her back on the US flag when the anthem was played at the Olympic trials. And you might think, well, how sad America really is falling apart, those Americans. But the same self-hatred and racial division is preached right here, often on the ABC, including even appeals to violence.
But the Australian flag, to me, has now become... I identify that with racism. Does anyone else?
Well, the ongoing genocide that is still current here today.
We've tried for 230 plus years to appeal to the colonisers' morality, which just doesn't seem to exist. So I think violence is okay. Yeah.
I think that's really good
stuff.
Sovereignty was never ceded! F*** a birth! F*** Whitey! Shit on your colonisation.
Okay, this poison is now getting to schools as well. For instance, senior members of the Melbourne Graduate School of Education, which teaches the teachers, instructs them that schools are part of a system of colonial rule and that educators like them must also understand and challenge the structural racism these experts claims runs through Australia. And they must do this to transform settler colonial institutions, they say, like schools, universities, hospitals, prisons and parliaments. Now, right now in Canada, another English-speaking country, we're seeing the destructive danger of this kind of contempt, this hatred for supposedly racist colonial countries. Now, for decades there, many children of Canada's Indigenous people were sent or forced to go to boarding schools run for the government by Catholic and Anglican churches. Now, that's being damned now as cultural genocide. Then came wild stories of these institutions murdering or disappearing these children. And even Queen Elizabeth was accused of stealing some children on a supposed visit in 1964.
In mid-October of 1964, kissing cousins Elizabeth and Philip paid a royal visit to a Catholic residential school for Aboriginal children in Kamloops, British Columbia, Canada. The group that disappeared was 7 boys and 3 girls in age from 6 to 14 years old. They were all from the SMART group in the class.
And running riot on social media was footage of a so-called spirit dancer who said he'd seen all this with his own eyes.
The Queen can visit for about 3 days, 3 days, I don't know how long it was, I think it was about 3 days actually, and a lot of children went missing there.
Now, the story is, of course, idiotic. The Queen was in Canada that year, yes, but stayed on the other side of the country, didn't go to the school. But what white academics and politicians dare today to challenge such victim stories? From Indigenous victims, of course. And it all came to a head, this stuff, when hundreds of human remains of children were found in unmarked graves around these schools, with wild claims reported last week by our own ABC, among others, that this proved the mass murder of Indigenous people, which is again false. I mean, one inquiry into this claimed that more than 3,000 children had died at these homes over a century or so, but admitted that, yes, OK, they did include many children who died of TB or some other illnesses. Others died of the cold after running away. There's some question about their methodology. And to save money, these children were buried at the school. Now, I agree with you. Hard and cruel, but I also point out these are harsh times for many people. But murder? But this was all the excuse that activists needed to gear up their war on the West, on Canada's British heritage particularly, with a statue of Queen Victoria last week torn down by a mob and even beheaded. But worse, you see now, church after church after church being burned down, a dozen so far, both Catholic ones and Anglican ones. Even a church built by Vietnamese refugees has been torched.
We are refugee Vietnamese. We come from Vietnam, escape Vietnam to come here to get more freedom to live, and we think that it is a good country, and now it happened. We think that it maybe it's not safe to be here in Canada compared to Vietnam.
Now, it is sick, but we have seen the same thing right here, this stoking of hatred of this country, of the churches, all that kind of stuff. We've had, for instance, the false claims that racist white officials stole up to 100,000 children from good homes just because they were Aboriginal. The Human Rights Commission claimed that. It's false. In fact, no one in a decade has met my challenge to name even 10 such cases with evidence. And our courts have not found a single such case. What we have instead seen was children being sent away to school or removed from danger, exactly like we do today, or abandoned. Yet white politicians think it's racist to say that. And so they say sorry instead and get praised for their compassion.
For the pain, suffering and hurt of these stolen generations, their descendants and for their families left behind, we say sorry.
And we've also seen the church burnings here. The churches were accused of being part of the stolen generation's atrocity. And we also have to say it's absolutely true that some Catholic priests last century were evil pedophiles. It's also true that some bishops here, even an archbishop, Frank Little, covered up for them. Shameful. But it is also true that churches here do incredible good to this very day, including helping the sick, the elderly, the dying, the poor. Yet the hatred of their faith that's whipped up by the media elite has had vigilantes burn churches here as well. In fact, you had actress Rachel Griffiths, for instance, telling a very approving ABC host that the burning of a beautiful old church in Brighton in Melbourne was a relief to her. In fact, she said, I was quite elated when I heard the news this morning because many years before, a pedophile preach alleged had worked there. And as those activists keep yelling on our ABC, burn this down. Now, the excuses for the rage and the burnings may be different in every case here, Canada, the US too, which last year had its cities burning in Black Lives Matter protests, but the current is the same and it moves in the same direction. It's a current of hatred for the West, for the British legacy and the freedoms it's brought us. And it's taking us back to the past, to tribalism and to violence. And now ask yourself, where are the leaders who'll stand up against this?